Welcome to Irvine, California, or I guess we're in Tustin, California. Welcome to the training camp edition of the Saints Insider podcast. I am Luke Johnson, your Saints beat writer for NOLA.com, joined here by my fellow beat writer, Matthew Paris. We're going to go over a lot of stuff today, stuff that we've seen in the first 2 days of training camp. We're coming to you live from our Airbnb. About 15 minutes away from where Saints are holding camp. 15 minutes is pretty good in LA traffic, right?
Yeah, no, it's exactly kind of 15. The GPS doesn't lie. So, hey, credit to the technology, I guess.
Yeah, there's a lot of technology going on out here. Matt, we are just going to kind of, I think, the Saints have not really done a whole lot of stuff that is like wow stuff or stuff that really kind of should get you excited as a football fan. But like, I think we've learned a couple things in the first couple days. So let's just kind of go over what we have seen and what we've noted and maybe what we're kind of expecting to see in the future. So let's start this off with just like the kind of basic news. I think it's to me, if we're going off of what we've talked about all summer, I think one of the most disappointing things out of the first couple of days is like 5 minutes into the first practice, Kendre Miller's walking off the field with the training staff. Dennis Allen says in some rather pointed comments after practice that it's a hamstring injury. Dennis Allen's obviously frustrated with it. So kind of what's your takeaway from that?
Yeah, my takeaway is just how frustrated he was. He said that you can't make the roster if you can't stay healthy. And, a lot of the times when you ask players about their injuries, they'll blame just bad luck. But Allen's comment wasn't something that necessarily indicated, oh, what a tough break for Kendre. It was, does this guy need to get himself in better shape? Did he not come in adequately prepared? And now we'll see how long this injury lasts. But yeah, as we talked about all summer, there was a clear opportunity here for him to become the second running back. Alvin Kamara is here, but if he wasn't, he even had an opportunity to become the first running back. There was a role, and there still could be a role for Kendre Miller in this offense, but right now that's not going to happen.
Look, the number 71 overall pick from last year's draft. He came into training camp last year already nursing an injury from the previous season at TCU. Dealt with an injury during training camp last year. Opened the season on the sidelines because of an injury. Missed several games in the middle of the season. I think it was with a sprained ankle, if I remember correctly. Never really got off the ground last year because of injuries. And we saw that tantalizing glimpse of him in week 18 where he really showed what he can do. I think that had a lot of people excited, but like really disappointing for the very first day of training camp to see him go down. We'll see how long he is out, but it's something that we're going to be watching closely for. You mentioned obviously the other big news and probably the biggest news of training camp so far for the Saints is Alvin Kamara reporting for camp on time and coming out there and participating fully.
Yeah,
and not limited. He's not a holdout. He's not a hold in. He is number 41 in a Saints uniform doing the things that he does.
Yeah, and he posted that image on social media of him next to Marshawn Lynch. And so, you were wondering, is he here just so he's not going to get fined? But I'll give him credit, man. He's come in with a good attitude. It seems like he's actually participating. He's a big part of their offense. I mean, you said it earlier of just kind of it is run play after run play. If I had a nickel for every time they'd be in nickel, I wouldn't have any nickels. So we've seen a lot of base defense, and just kind of simple or creative runs. There's been a lot of motion, but that's the thing that's clear to me is okay. So what does this mean for the Saints that he's here? I think there's still productive play to come out of Alvin Kamara, and he looks like he fits this offense really well.
Yeah, I was actually talking to somebody today, and they were like, everybody runs wide zone, right? And everybody, but it's that they are going to now run a larger proportion of it than they did in the past. Right. And the thing that a running back needs to have in order to be successful in this offense is vision and patience. Mm-hmm. And those are two things that Alvin Kamara definitely has.
He does. And I remember talking to Eric McCoy during OTAs he said like the problem with last year's run game was basically like they would try and hit the hole. If that wasn't there, there'd be a cutback, and that cut back, because it wasn't blocked properly, would often go like nowhere. And we've seen a cutback here and there in this offense so far. It didn't really actually go anywhere today, but there is just a lot more creativity, I think, with guys are getting athletic. You wrote today about the offensive linemen. I think that's really going to help just this scheme change and helping them kind of get out in space. But there's different ways to kind of help free up Kamara, let alone with what he has left as a running.
Yeah, and look, I personally just think that it's important he's here
Right.
for this team. Him not holding out or holding in, whatever the case is, where he's not participating on the field, I think is really important for this team because he's clearly a big part of their plans offensively. And even in the limited sort of looks that we've seen so far, and very run heavy, very short passing game, a lot of screens and stuff that we've seen, he's clearly a focal point for them.
Yes.
So it's important that he's not holding out. And look, he was very frank in his discussions with us about what he's looking for, about why he left in the first place during the veteran minicamp. He says he wants to be here. He wants to retire as a Saint. He doesn't have any interest in playing anywhere else, but he's also looking for something that's fair. And he understands, as everybody else does, that he has no guaranteed money on his contract next year. He has a $29 million cap hit. He understands that there's no way that's going to happen. So he's just looking for some additional security beyond this year. Now, that is also going to come with money,
right?
Guaranteed money. We'll see if the Saints are willing to meet him. See if he's willing to meet the Saints. A lot of that is still yet to be resolved, but the fact that he's here, I think, is an undoubtable good thing.
Yeah, and he didn't necessarily touch on this, but I kind of wonder if one of the reasons he showed up is maybe he realized he didn't have as much leverage as he had hoped. You could have played the holdout game like you did in 2020, but the way that the CBA changed in the NFL is it's a lot more punitive for players now to hold out. He doesn't really have the production from the last few years. I think that hurts his case. And I think the most surprising thing he said, and I give him credit for being that truthful, but it might hurt his negotiating stances. He said he's willing to play out the year, even if he doesn't get a new contract. Now he kind of walked it back, but I think he
he realized what he was.
I
think he realized what he said when he tried to walk it back. Yeah,
he was pretty honest about the Saints. The Saints are going to pay him. I think it's either because Alvin Kamara will have earned it throughout the course of the season, or they realize his value to the franchise overall. But it's not going to be. It's just going to be kind of an interesting situation to watch because I don't think he has a ton of leverage right now.
Yeah, I agree. Not a lot of 29. He just turned. Today is his 29th birthday, by the way.
Yeah.
Not a lot of 29-year-old running backs have what you would call leverage in contract negotiations in the NFL, which Kamara touched upon. Okay, so let's get into some quick observations from what we've seen in practice. You were actually in charge of writing our observations today, which you can go read up on NOLA.com. We'll have a set of observations for you every day the Saints are out on the practice field. So what was kind of your main takeaway from today?
Yeah, it's early on, but I think today we got a pretty good glimpse of what roster competitions are legit, which ones are, okay, maybe this is a competition, but only if some guys lose their momentum. I think the backup quarterback spot, we saw Spencer Rattler go ahead of Jake Haener today. That probably will switch tomorrow if I had to guess. But I think they're gonna alternate this fairly regularly. And then the offensive line, we've talked about how much does this team really believe in Trevor Penning and then Nick Saldiveri. I think they're going to give those guys a lot of rope to earn their spots. We haven't really seen them change any of the reps. And that's something that Dennis Allen said after practice was that they're going to give them pretty much an opportunity to see what that 5 looks like. These guys are young. They need the reps to grow. There's still going to be competition, but only if, say a Lucas Patrick or a Landon Young really impress on the second team and warrant kind of that step up.
Yeah. And I think that's especially when you're talking about young players, and that's exactly what we're talking about here. I would say, without knowing it off the top of my head, probably every single member that starting 5 that we're talking about right now is 27 or 28 or younger.
Right.
Eric McCoy is definitely the oldest out of all of them. Cesar Ruiz is still, I think, just 25 years old. So these are young players who are going to need the snaps.
Yeah.
And they're going to need to fail a little bit and get better and learn from it. So yeah, I don't think it's at all surprising that this is kind of the tack they're taking here.
Right. And I think you're even seeing it with a guy who's not necessarily, I think his spot is he's a clear-cut starter, and that's Talise Fuanga, their first-round pick. But you saw today with an injury to Justin Herron from yesterday, instead of putting Oli Udo at left tackle with the second team right away, they just had Fuanga stay in there, and he got 3 more reps. Like, this is a guy that, I've kind of referred to him as an afterthought just because of they've plugged him on the left side, but he's still learning that position given that he played right in college. And so if you get an opportunity to have 3 extra snaps, take advantage of those 3 extra snaps. I think it's actually very valuable for him, and as much playing time as he can get, I think they're going to give it to him.
When we're talking about competitions for roster spots or for where you are in the lineup, and we brought up Kendre Miller already. Pretty clear cut right now. Alvin Kamara, Jamal Williams, and I think this new scheme can be very beneficial for Jamal Williams as well after a really rough debut season for him in New Orleans. But with no Kendre Miller in there, is there anybody else in that running back room that has kind of caught your eye?
Yeah, Jordan Mims.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, 33.
Yeah.
And
the teammate from of Jake Hader's from Fresno State. Yeah.
That guy has really. He's just made some really powerful runs. Seems to have good size, good speed. James Robinson is a former 1,000-yard rusher in the NFL. I know he's a little bit older now, but he's still a guy with a name, and Mims is getting that opportunity and going ahead of him. I'm interested. We'll talk about the preseason eventually, but I'm interested to see what he does in a preseason game because he's looked really good so far. Granted, there's no pads, but he's looked solid so far.
Yeah, and I think Mims was one of those guys who joined the team last year after roster cutdown day. He was in training camp with the Buffalo Bills last year, got cut after the cutdown date and ended up landing on the Saints practice squad. So we haven't actually gotten to see what he can do in a game setting. I think I'm with you on that. And I'm looking forward to it. One of the things that I saw today that was just mildly interesting, when the Saints are working on 2 practice fields, and in between when they do their normal team drills, they send the first and second team offense to one field, and then the rest of the team off to another field, and they all just kind of like scrimmage, do walkthrough against each other. And today I just noticed and found it a little bit interesting that the second team strong side linebacker, so somebody's probably they're not planning on playing a bunch of snaps. That was Jalen Ford, the rookie linebacker, who we didn't see much of at all during the offseason program this summer. So it was, I think, interesting to see them getting a look at him, with the first team or behind the first team defensive line, and working him in with that group there too.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about that linebacker is a really competitive spot, but he's the guy that I think missed time. He was behind the 8 ball a little bit, just kind of at no fault of his own. But hey, if you're getting these reps, they're not. Every team wants to play their rookies, but the Saints especially aren't a team that just hands rookies an opportunity and say, let's see what you have. You've got to be. I saw Vic Fangio say this with the Philadelphia Eagles. These guys have to earn their playing time. They're going to have to, you could do it, but nothing's going to be handed. And I think a lot of coaches have that similar mentality. It's kind of a cliche, but I do think it's good that Ford seemed like he was up to the task.
Yeah. Okay. Outside of the stuff that we've seen on the practice field, which again, very limited, very short practices. And that's CBA mandated. Guys are just out there in shorts and t-shirts and helmets. And they're running very, very basic stuff. So we'll keep you updated on that as it kind of progresses. But I think we've actually heard some really interesting stuff away from the field and talking to these guys. And one of them that I really want to bring up with you is Cam Jordan's whole press conference yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought he had a lot of interesting things to say about A, the way this team is perceived, B, this kind of ticking clock that he feels and the sense of urgency that he feels, and C, where he's at as a player. Yeah. So I was kind of curious to hear what your reactions were when you heard that yesterday.
Yeah, he was on fire yesterday.
Yeah,
it was really fun to cover. But I think my favorite thing about covering football players is their tendency to be like, we don't listen to outside criticism.
It's
but
not a
boy,
tendency.
does it.
Yeah. It is like across the board a universal fact
Yes.
of all NFL football players never read their Twitter mentions. They never read the news media
Right.
or watch TV.
But boy, they sure have a chip on their shoulder all of a sudden. I wonder what could have caused that. Now, I do think the lack of results have really probably that I would say that would be the number one motivating factor. And these guys have all acknowledged it. We heard Demario Davis today say that they've underperformed across the board, and that he wants to have a team that the city can be proud of. And I know we'll get back to Jordan in a second, but I actually think that is the underlying issue here. Like, this fan base is pissed, and I think that has gotten to players, and I think they understand that, but it's also kind of created a little bit of edge with them because, they might not check their Twitter mentions, but God, I do, and holy cow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Cam kind of got into that a little bit. DeMario really got into that today. DeMario Davis, and he said, "I'm not defending them, but I'm defending them."
Yeah,
and he was referring to Derek Carr and Dennis Allen. He says it's not based off of these criticisms that he's seen, but obviously it is.
Yes. Well,
it's the noise around those two in particular has been really, really loud. And DeMario Davis came up and really offered a pretty impassioned plea to the fan base to kind of chill out a little bit, I guess, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think the thing he was saying was that he didn't feel obligated to stick up for them. Like, it wasn't necessarily because of the noise, but that he wanted to, because he's been around these guys, and particularly with Carr, like, their relationship is pretty close. I mean, they hosted that religious event together, but even beyond that, like, you see them interacting at practice all the time. Even when Davis picked off Carr on the first day of practice, like, they kind of had fun with it. It wasn't really like a, adversarial thing at all. And so there is, if we want to get back to Jordan now, there is this thing with the Saints that they realize that, like, they don't have many years left. I know Cam Jordan said that maybe he has 3 or 4, but like, you just can't assume that.
Yeah.
And so that's the interesting thing. And I actually think, even though I wasn't here, you'd be able to speak better to this, but the way that they've had some of these devastating playoff losses, especially with the Minneapolis Miracle, like, that has really kind of like left an imprint on a lot of these guys, and to try and capitalize on that window. And because they haven't been able to capitalize on it, I think only creates this urgency even more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that, and Cam's 35 and Mario's 34, and Tyrann Mathieu has won a Super Bowl, but he's 32 and he's playing in his hometown, and they're playing the Super Bowl in his hometown this year. Like, I think guys understand that there's a sense that if you're going to do it, now's the time. Yeah. And especially when they could probably take some people by surprise early in the year if they are as good as they think they are.
Right. Well, that's the thing I think is also really interesting, is that this team hasn't shied away from Super Bowl talk. And, you can roll your eyes at it, and you can be Amon-Ra St. Brown and the Lions and, like, think, okay, the Saints actually don't believe that they're going to win the Super Bowl. And heck, I'm not sure. I don't think the Saints will win the Super Bowl, but these players, it doesn't just feel like lip service to me. It's something that they, like, obviously want to achieve. And it's like, that too creates a chip. Like, I do think there's, like, a legitimate chip on this team's shoulder. I don't think it's like just they're saying it, oh, we have a chip on our shoulder, Like, I actually see, like, guys can get pretty testy sometimes, even for the spring. Like, there is this urgency with the new coaching staff. Like, I actually kind of buy it.
Yeah, I think I do too. And maybe that's just our proximity bias, right? Because we're around them. But
we've been around other teams before. Like, we realize, like, when people, like, we didn't bring the bell to.
I'll just
yes,
ding.
ding. But so when I covered Washington, one of the things that would always drive me nuts, especially I think it was the 21 season, it was the end of the season. We all stuck together. We never quit. We didn't fight within. And then, like, Jonathan Allen and Daron Payne got on, like, a national fight on the sideline where they were swinging at each other. And it's like, how can you say that you guys didn't like quit when you're literally fighting on the sidelines? It doesn't make sense. Like, I think here we're seeing stuff, at least anecdotally, that supports the notion that they have a chip on their shoulder. That's my point.
Yeah. And look, a lot of the guys on this team have, as DeMario Davis referenced today, a lot of these guys have been on highly successful teams. A lot of them have been on teams that were within like a fraction of a second, a blown call of going to the Super Bowl. So they know what success looks like. They haven't experienced a lot of it the last couple of years. DeMario Davis said today, look, you're comparing the end of the Sean Payton, Drew Brees era to the start of a different era when you should be comparing the start of a different era to the start of the last era. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but I get what he's saying. So yeah, I think they're just asking for a little patience and a little belief. And we'll see if they earn it.
Yeah. Well, the other thing too is Mickey Loomis brought this up, and I think we probably will write about this at some point. Is there's a lot of younger players on this team that, you know, the chip on their shoulder to prove themselves, to show that they're capable of a bigger role. We talked to Chris Olave today, but we spent most of Chris Olave's media session talking about Rashid Shaheed.
Yeah.
And the opportunities that he may get in this offense, and to show that he can be more than just a deep threat. But when you have these labels, when you have these narratives around you, I do think it gets the guys, or can annoy guys. And he's a perfect example, I think, of someone who is just waiting, chomping at the bit to do more than just be a speed threat, to be more than just Rashid run, you know, whatever Derek Carr's quote was last year.
Freaking run. I saw Rashid Shaheed down there. F it. Throw it.
Right.
I think that's going to be one of the most fun aspects of this season, especially early on, is seeing if they actually have anything close to resembling a youth movement on this team. And I think that's really important for the future of the team, especially considering where they're at against the salary cap. They need to find some young impact players. And a lot of times, as we were talking about with the offensive line, sometimes finding the young impact players is just giving them the opportunities to play. Whereas in the past, we've seen the Saints team try to kind of load up with veterans who they knew they could count on because they had what they felt was a Super Bowl caliber team. Sometimes you need to give the young guys opportunities to take their lumps, learn from it, and become really good players.
And if we're going back to like the action that we've seen on the field for the first 2 days, that definitely seems apparent, right?
Yeah.
Like you do see Nick Saldiveri, you see like Paulson Adebo, even a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry, who's a rookie. He's been mostly on the second team, but hey, they're going to stick him on outside if they're not going to play in base, and they're just going to give him like a good role right away and see what he's up to. Like there are definitely opportunities for these guys to get their reps, show what they can do, and impress the coaches from there.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are you most looking forward to kind of figuring out over the next couple of days?
It's a good question. I mean, I'm really interested to see if the offensive line, how much, like once the pads come on, like Trevor Penning has had a kind of a really rough, I think he was better today, but the first day was pretty rough. Seeing that, I just want to see that the cohesion of the line, I think, would be my number one. And then my number two is, because they've been in base, it's really just been Jonathan Abram over Jordan Howden. Is that actually a competition once it goes to nickel? Those are kind of the two things: the offensive line and the safety.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, they've almost been strictly in their base defense. It's 4 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 4 defensive backs. When they get to the field in the regular season, they're going to be playing sub packages almost the whole time, almost exclusively 5 or 6 defensive backs. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they line up in that way. I am also looking forward to seeing the pads come on. That comes on Monday of next week. It's their first day in pads. So we should get a better sense of where the run game is at. Get a better sense of what their pass protection looks like. I think those two are really, really key aspects to this offense. I mean, you're talking about the offensive line play. I mean, they're going to go only as far as those guys can take them.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it'll, like, we talked about Kendre Miller at the beginning of the show, but I'm just interested to see like how these injuries progress during camp. Who else do they lose? Like there were 2 other injuries today: Trajan
Jeffcoat,
and
Shane Lemieux. Shane Lemieux's seemed
ankle injury.
Yeah, it seemed like he was playing on it for a little bit, so it seemed like maybe. Right. But Jeff Coates looked pretty significant. He was in a lot of pain on the field.
Yeah, and so just can they withstand these injuries? And then when do these guys get back? Like Chase Young, he looks, I think, a little slow so far. I mean, he definitely is starting to work his way back. They can afford to be patient with him. But, the first 2 days have pretty much just been, all right, Chase Young, you're going to do some individual drills. You're going to do walkthrough, but you're not going to do all the individual drills. Like there are moments where he's working out with the trainer to the side. It doesn't necessarily look like he's going anywhere close to full speed yet. And, I just think the defense, like we've talked about this so many times, but they need a pass rush. I think he's an important part of their plans if they want to improve in that area. And, that there's going to be patient with them. I'm not hitting the panic alarm on Chase Young yet, but it's just something to monitor.
I agree. And we will continue to monitor it. We are out here in California, outside of a few trips to Phoenix and San Francisco for preseason games. We are going to be here in place for about a month. So my wife and daughter are not very happy about that, but they will get over it because I'm making money covering the Saints out here. So, okay, guys, that's all we got for tonight. But we will be back with you pretty regularly while we're out here. Hopefully if we have any sort of issues on this, we can figure it out. This is my first time setting up a podcast, so I hope I did it right for you guys. For Matthew Paris, I am Luke Johnson. Our photographer, Sophie Germer, is waving from the background. We will see you guys later. Follow all of our work over at NOLA.com. We'll have a bunch of it out there. Check you guys later.